For the first time in more than 100 years, the brass bell on this 1891 Porter steam locomotive is ringing in Jacksonville. This little engine, called by some the teapot and others the peanut roaster, was the first engine on the Medford and Jacksonville Railroad, later known as the Rogue River Valley Railway. The line was built after the California and Oregon Railroad bypassed Jacksonville in a race to complete its line to the California border.
So they get it here. The Jacksonville merchants were all excited. They're going to get revived here. They're going to start having business. But people were moving into Medford. There was this giant sound you heard. It was the ONC sucking everybody out of here, and they moved to Medford, and the town's population dropped to just a couple hundred people.
But the opening of the line in 1891 came with problems, and one of them was that this little engine that kind of reminds you of the famous little engine that could.
Small engine, as she toiled, kept puffing, "I think I can, I think I can."
Was just not powerful enough. Although it was brand new from the Porter factory, it just wasn't big enough for the work it was called upon to do.
They soon found out that just going between Medford and Jacksonville, it couldn't pull much more than one loaded coach. And, and if they had any freight business in mind, which they did, it wasn't going to be adequate. So basically by 1895, they bought a second-hand locomotive, which was larger, and this one was standby service.
One, it was called the peanut roaster because it just didn't put out enough steam to do other than just roast peanuts. The other story is that was called the teakettle because all it was good for was brewing tea.
Or that its steam whistle sounded like a teapot sounding off. Within 10 years, it was sold to a lumber company and went through several owners before being restored and brought back to Jacksonville last month.
The first time the train showed up here in January of '91, the town was so excited. The little whistle was going. They gathered around it, and they all jumped on, paid their fare, and went roaring back into Medford. But there was no return trip that day. And so all these people who were on board the car had to walk back to Jacksonville.
Little Railroad was designed to connect the county seat to the county's largest town of Medford and the main line railroad. But when World War I came along, it performed another service.
The railroad was a school bus, and it would take the kids and it went right past where Medford High is, and they would go to school, which is now where the courthouse is. And they'd get off there, and the kids all the way from West Side School would walk over here and pick up the train and take it into Medford.
For only 5 cents a ride. At other times, kids at Jacksonville School, where the train passed by, liked to play tricks on the crew.
In the morning, they put lard and axle grease on there, and then when the train, woo-woo, it came through, of course, it would start spinning. And the conductor then realized real fast that he had to carry a bucket of sand with him, so when the train was spinning out, he'd jump off, walk in front of it, and would sand the track.
And the kids could watch the show from the school nearby. One claim to fame was when the owner of the line, W.S. Barnum, put his 13-year-old son John on the payroll as conductor. At the time, John was said to be the youngest railroad conductor in the nation. Another story was told that when Barnum tried to claim a free ride on the Pennsylvania Railroad, as was customary in the industry back then, Pennsylvania authorities turned him down when they found out the Rogue River Valley Railroad was only 5 miles long. Barnum replied, "Your railroad may be a lot longer, but ours is just as wide." And he apparently got his free pass. It's actually been most of a century since the Rogue River Valley Railway actually carried passengers or freight between Jacksonville and Medford. But to get the old locomotive back and have it set on the exact place where it once ran through this valley is certainly something that supporters hope will bring more visitors to this historic town. In Jacksonville, Ron Brown, Newswatch 12.